The first time Dr. Nathan Hale stepped aboard the Eclipsera, he thought he'd accidentally wandered into the afterlife reserved for introverts. The air was too clean, the corridors too quiet, and the crew, tall, pale figures with eyes like polished glass, moved as if gravity were just a polite suggestion. He had been briefed, of course: observe. Report. Don't offend the Vayari. But no one had warned him that they would communicate mainly through silence and meaningful glances that made him feel like the punchline to a cosmic joke only they understood. He dragged his duffel bag down the corridor, its wheels clattering like a crime in progress. The sound echoed for miles, or it felt like it. Every Vayari head turned toward him, not in annoyance, but in something far worse: serene curiosity. Nathan grinned nervously and waved. "Hi there. Just your friendly neighborhood human. I promise not to explode anything." Not one of them replied, at least not aloud. A few blinked. One tilted her head, as if tasting the shape of his thoughts. He decided to stop talking before someone decided he was defective. His quarters were spacious by human standards but eerily minimalist. Smooth metallic walls shimmered faintly, responding to ambient light, and a bed that looked like it had been grown rather than built waited in the corner. The air hummed softly, as though the ship itself was breathing. Nathan tossed his bag onto the bed and sighed. "Well, Nathan," he muttered to himself, "welcome to space. Population, you, some glowing furniture, and 100 telepathic elves who think sarcasm is a disease." He laughed quietly at his own joke, then stopped. The sound didn't fade the way it should have. It was as if the room absorbed it, holding it like a secret. He shook his head. Maybe the recycled oxygen was getting to him already. He unpacked his equipment, set up his data pad, and tried to focus on the mission. Study Vayari technology, understand their approach to nonverbal communication, and definitely not fall asleep in front of the ship's AI again. Hours passed. The ship's rhythm was slow, meditative, filled with subtle hums and shifting lights that responded to unseen hands. Nathan spent his first day in the observation lab, where the walls were transparent and the gas giant below painted everything in amber light. The Vayari worked around him in silence, exchanging information telepathically, their long fingers gliding over consoles like musicians coaxing sound from glass. Every few minutes, Nathan caught himself whispering commentary under his breath: "Bad habit." It was either that or start screaming just to fill the air. When he muttered, "If I don't hear a single word soon, I'm going to start naming the lab equipment," one of the Vayari paused. She turned slightly, her movements smooth and deliberate, and looked straight at him. Her eyes glimmered with faint color, greenish-silver, like sea glass catching sunlight. Nathan froze, realizing belatedly that he might have offended someone's deity or furniture. But she didn't frown. Instead, she spoke, softly, precisely, her voice like the edge of a song. "You're not as alone as you think." Nathan blinked. "Sorry, what?" The woman, if he could even call her that, she radiated an otherworldly composure that made "woman" sound too small a word, simply smiled. Then she returned to her work as if nothing had happened. He stood there for a full minute, mouth slightly open, brain desperately paging through the manual titled things that definitely didn't happen in grad school. Maybe she'd overheard him through some translator implant. Or maybe, and this seemed far more likely, he was going slowly insane. That night, he couldn't sleep. The ship's hum was too rhythmic, too alive. He lay in the dark, thinking of her, the long-eared alien woman with the voice that had seemed to glide straight into his head. The Vayari didn't speak unless necessary, their communication was mostly telepathic resonance. But how could she have heard him? His muttering was barely audible. Unless, of course, she hadn't heard his words. "Great," he whispered, covering his face with his pillow. "Day 1 and I've already managed to flirt telepathically. With an alien. Who probably reads thoughts the way humans read text messages." He could almost hear his supervisor's voice: "Remember, Nathan, diplomacy is about restraint." "Sure. Restraint. He'd try that once he stopped feeling like his brain had a leak. The next morning, he found her waiting by the analysis console. She stood perfectly still, her black hair cascading like silk, her long ears twitching slightly as if adjusting to an unseen frequency. "Dr. Hale," she greeted him, the syllables wrapping gently around his name. "Your thoughts were interesting last night." He choked on his coffee. "You, what?" "No, hold on. I didn't, there was no thinking. None at all. I was asleep. Or trying to be. Very unsuccessfully." Her smile deepened just enough to hint that she was enjoying this. "You humans dream loudly." Nathan stared at her, then sighed. "Fantastic. I can't even keep my subconscious to myself." He glanced at the nearby equipment, then back at her. "Do you, mind telling me how private my brain isn't?" "The mind is like light," she said simply. "It can pass through many things. But sometimes it reflects." "That's poetic," he said. "Also deeply unsettling." She tilted her head again, studying him as though he were a particularly nervous experiment. "I find it pleasant," she said at last. "Your thoughts move with humor. Most minds I hear are sharp and cold. Yours is warm, even when frightened." He rubbed the back of his neck, unsure whether to feel complimented or mildly violated. "Thanks. I guess it's nice to know I've got a warm brain. Most people just call it overactive." The corner of her lips lifted again, just barely. It wasn't a laugh, but close. He decided then that he liked the sound of her almost laughter, the way it bent the sterile air of the Eclipsera into something nearly human. Later, when she drifted away toward the command chamber, Nathan watched her go and whispered, "You're not as alone as you think." He smiled faintly to himself. "Yeah, I get it now." Then, just before the corridor door sealed behind her, a voice, soft, familiar, teasing, echoed faintly in his head. "I heard that." He froze. "Oh, come on," he groaned aloud. "I'm going to have to start thinking in code." Somewhere deep in the ship, the walls seemed to hum with amusement. Nathan decided, on the morning of his third day aboard the Eclipsera, that he would stop talking to himself. It was a reasonable goal, noble even. If one was living among a race of mind readers, one should probably stop narrating every passing thought like an over-caffeinated audiobook. He lasted 12 minutes. The lab was too quiet, the kind of silence that wrapped around him like thick fog. The Vayari moved gracefully between holographic panels, their long fingers gliding through light as they manipulated quantum samples suspended in transparent fields. Every action seemed part of a silent ballet choreographed by thought alone. Nathan tried to mimic their stillness, but humans weren't built for quiet grace. He coughed, fidgeted, accidentally dropped a stylus that rolled all the way under a control console. When he bent to retrieve it, his knee cracked loudly enough to echo. One of the Vayari glanced at him with faint amusement, Sayori, of course. She was assigned as his liaison, which sounded diplomatic until Nathan realized it meant, the one who stops him from blowing up the ship by accident. Her presence was both reassuring and unnerving. When she looked at him, he felt as if she could peel back every defensive layer of humor and see the raw machinery underneath. Still, she never mocked him for it, well, not verbally. Her quiet smiles were another story. "Dr. Hale," she said one morning, as he awkwardly tried to calibrate a Vayari spectrometer that required no buttons, knobs, or anything remotely familiar. "You are pressing nothing." "I'm pressing the air very confidently," he replied. "It's a human technique." The faintest ripple of amusement brushed his thoughts. It wasn't quite speech, more like the psychic equivalent of someone laughing quietly behind a hand. She wasn't even hiding it anymore. He sighed, lowering his hands. "You're enjoying this, aren't you?" "Your methods are inefficient," she said, though her tone held warmth. "Yet, entertaining." "That's what my last girlfriend said before she dumped me," Nathan muttered. Then, realizing she might have heard that too, he quickly added, not that it's relevant to interstellar diplomacy. Sayori's long ears twitched. I do not understand the word dumped in that context. He smiled awkwardly. Oh, it's when one person decides the other is less efficient than expected. I see. You were found inefficient. Wow. Brutal honesty must be a cultural thing for you. The air between them shimmered faintly, and Nathan realized it wasn't metaphorical. Sayori's psychic aura had a visible quality, a subtle distortion like heat waves rising from metal. He wondered whether that shimmer was connected to emotions, but he didn't dare ask yet. His curiosity, however, was relentless. Humans were explorers by nature, and there was no frontier more tantalizing than the one that looked back into your own thoughts. That night, he found himself lying awake again, the ship humming softly around him. He tried to keep his mind blank, but human brains had never mastered silence. Every thought was a pebble in still water, sending ripples outward. What if she could feel them? What if right now she was listening, amused, exasperated, or worse, pitying? He turned over, groaning. Don't think about her. Don't think about her ears. Definitely don't think about how graceful she looks when, damn it, Nathan. A pulse of laughter, not his own, bloomed faintly in the back of his skull. He sat upright. Oh no. No, no, no. You're not supposed to be tuned in during off hours. Her voice, soft and melodic even without sound, filled his mind. Your thoughts are very loud. I could not ignore them if I tried. He pressed a pillow to his face. I'm going to invent mental earplugs. This is harassment by proximity. You are afraid, she observed, her tone gentle, probing. Not of me. Of being known. That's a little personal, don't you think, he mumbled. Some of us enjoy a good mystery, like, say, our own sanity. Her amusement deepened. You use humor to protect yourself. Of course I do. It's that or screaming into a pillow every night, and we're already halfway there. He could feel her curiosity wrapping around him, not invasive but almost affectionate. For the first time, he realized she wasn't simply eavesdropping. She was sharing. A bridge of thought formed between them, thin as spider silk. He sensed faint impressions from her mind, images of crystalline landscapes, of pale blue skies pierced by towers of light. Emotions, too, serenity, wonder, and an ache that felt like loneliness wearing a mask of peace. Nathan swallowed. You're showing me things. Why? Her mental voice softened. Because you spoke into the dark. And I have listened to silence all my life. He had no reply. The words settled in his chest like gravity, pulling something unspoken to the surface. After a long moment, he whispered, for someone who claims to dislike noise, you picked the noisiest human in the galaxy. Perhaps I wish to hear laughter again, she thought. Nathan chuckled quietly. You're going to regret that wish. Over the next few days, their strange companionship deepened. They shared data and conversation, both spoken and mental. Sayori's telepathy, once a cause of unease, became a quiet rhythm that filled the long silences of the ship. She began to ask questions, curious, almost childlike questions about Earth, why humans argued over trivial things, why they sang songs about heartbreak, why they laughed even when sad. Nathan answered as best he could, often with half a grin and a shrug. When she asked why humans ate ice cream when their hearts were broken, he said, because it's cold and sweet, and that's the closest we can get to emotional refrigeration. She blinked slowly, translating the idiom in her head. You comfort yourselves with frozen sugar. Basically, yes. She nodded solemnly. This is logical. He stared at her, then burst into laughter. Oh, Sayori, you might be the first alien in history to call ice cream logical. Her expression softened, the faint glow around her ears brightening with amusement. And for a moment, just a heartbeat, the Eclipsera didn't feel so lonely, so vast, so filled with unspoken things. When Nathan left the lab that evening, his head was buzzing with both excitement and exhaustion. As he passed through the corridor, the lights above flickered faintly, following his pace. He could almost swear the ship itself was reacting to his mood. He smiled to himself. Okay, note to self, stop talking out loud. From somewhere behind him came a faint echo of laughter, hers, unmistakably hers, slipping through the air like the gentlest intrusion into his thoughts. And he didn't mind at all. The bond began like static at the edge of Nathan's awareness, faint, harmless, and easily ignored. But soon it grew stronger, a quiet hum that followed him through every corridor of the Eclipsera. He could sense Sayori even when she wasn't in the room, the faint shimmer of her consciousness brushing his mind like a familiar tune half-remembered. It should have been terrifying. Instead, it felt oddly comforting, like being haunted by someone who always meant well. He tried to pretend nothing had changed. During the morning briefing, he nodded along with the Vayari officers, feigning comprehension while alien glyphs floated in holographic arrays around the table. Every few minutes, Sayori would glance at him, her expression perfectly neutral. But beneath the calm, he could feel her thoughts whispering along the edge of his own, a flicker of amusement here, a subtle nudge there, as though she were silently commenting on everything he said. When he mentally muttered, "If they ask me to analyze another plasma resonance pattern, I'll melt into the nearest vent," her voice brushed his mind, warm and dry, that would be inefficient. Vents are not designed for emotional breakdowns. He coughed to hide his laugh. The nearest Vayari turned, curious. "Just, human humor," Nathan said quickly. "We find existential dread hilarious." After the meeting, he cornered Sayori in the lab. "Okay, we need to talk about boundaries." Her long ears twitched. "Boundaries?" "Yes. The invisible line between my mind and your mind. I love what we've got going on, great rapport, telepathic banter, mild existential crises, but I'd prefer to keep some thoughts private. Like, say, my childhood memories or how many snacks I hide under the lab console." Sayori tilted her head, pretending to think. "You are referring to the sweet discs wrapped in foil that you believe I do not know about." He gaped. "You. That was supposed to be classified information." She smiled faintly. "You hid them poorly." Nathan sighed, rubbing his temples. "I can't even have secret chocolate anymore." "What's next? You start finishing my sentences." She looked thoughtful for a moment, then said quietly, "You mean, exactly that," he finished for her, groaning. "You're doing it already." For all his grumbling, he couldn't deny the strange fascination blooming in him. The connection wasn't just mental, it was emotional. When she focused, he could feel her moods ripple through him. The soft hum of curiosity, the flicker of amusement, and sometimes, something deeper, a kind of aching calm that made his chest tighten. It was like sharing a heartbeat across light years of difference. They decided to run controlled experiments. Sayori claimed that their bond might have formed from a resonance between his neural patterns and her psychic field, a rare phenomenon, unheard of between species. Nathan's scientific curiosity overrode his embarrassment. "Fine," he said. "But if I start glowing or levitating, you're writing the report." She smiled. "I would find that aesthetically pleasing." Their tests began with simple exercises, emotion tracking, memory recall, shared visualization. Nathan would close his eyes, think of a color, and she would name it without hesitation. Then they moved to emotions. He thought of laughter, and she giggled softly. He imagined fear, and she frowned, whispering, "No, not that one." On the third attempt, something went wrong. He had tried to recall a moment of wonder, his first glimpse of the Earth from orbit, but the memory spilled open too fast, flooding the link between them. For a split second, he felt himself fall through the connection. He saw her world, vast crystalline plains under a violet sky, cities carved into glowing stone, and 1,000 minds humming in perfect silence. He felt her fear, her longing, her loneliness. And then it snapped back like an elastic band. He gasped, stumbling backward. She caught him before he hit the floor, her cool hand steadying him. "You saw," she said softly. He nodded, breathless. "You're home." And, something else. A flicker of uncertainty crossed her face. "You were not meant to see that far. Our minds are not designed to intertwine." Nathan tried to smile through the dizziness. "Well, too late. Guess we're officially cohabiting in the mental real estate market." Her eyes, bright and unreadable, met his. "You make light of everything." "Someone has to," he said, forcing a grin. "Otherwise the universe gets too serious and eats you alive." Sayori hesitated. "Among my people, such bonds are forbidden. To touch another's consciousness is to risk merging. Losing oneself." He blinked. "Merging, as in, our minds become one giant awkward roommate situation?" She didn't laugh this time. "As in losing distinction between who you are and who I am. Thoughts blending until separation becomes impossible." Nathan swallowed hard. "That sounds slightly terrifying." "It is." They stood in silence, the air between them humming faintly with their shared resonance. Then he sighed. "Well, I've already lost half my privacy and my chocolate stash, so what's a little existential fusion between friends?" That earned him a faint, reluctant smile. "You are reckless. Occupational hazard. Humanity runs on caffeine and bad decisions." The experiments continued, but now with caution, and unspoken curiosity. Each time their minds brushed, the bond deepened, resonating like a low note on a string. Nathan began to sense her emotions even without contact. When she entered a room, he could feel her before he saw her. One evening, as they reviewed their findings, the lights in the lab flickered. The instruments pulsed once, responding to an unseen surge of energy. Sayori looked sharply at him. That was not the ship. He blinked. "Wait, are you saying we caused that?" "The resonance between us is amplifying," she said quietly. "It is affecting the environment." "Fantastic," he muttered. "We're officially a health hazard. Maybe they'll give us our own warning label." Despite the joke, a thrill ran through him, fear, wonder, and something like anticipation. Whatever was happening between them was no longer just curiosity. It was evolution in motion. As they stood there, caught between science and something dangerously close to emotion, Sayori's thoughts brushed his once more. "If we continue, there may be no turning back." He smiled softly. "Then I guess we'd better make it worth the trip." Her laughter, silent and luminous, rippled through his mind like light bending through water. And in that moment, the hum of the Eclipsera seemed to change pitch, as if the ship itself was listening, curious about the new rhythm that two unlikely minds had begun to play. The following morning, Nathan woke to a low humming in the air that wasn't coming from the Eclipsera's engines. It felt like an echo, vibrating faintly in his skull, a psychic hangover. He sat up, rubbed his temples, and muttered, "Perfect. I've got telepathic tinnitus. Just what every scientist dreams of." The walls shimmered faintly in response, as if the ship itself was listening in on his misery. He dressed quickly and made his way to the lab, trying not to think about Sayori or the way her laughter still lingered in his head like a half-heard melody. When he arrived, she was already there, standing near the observation window, watching the gas giant below swirl in its slow, golden storms. Her expression was calm, but he could sense something beneath it, ripples of unease. Without turning, she said, "They are speaking of us." "Define they before I start panicking," Nathan said, setting down his tablet. "The council," she replied. "They have felt the resonance between us. It disturbs the ship's harmonic field." Nathan frowned. "So, what, we're causing bad vibes in the psychic Wi-Fi?" She glanced over her shoulder, one corner of her mouth lifting. In a manner of speaking. He exhaled, leaning against the console. Great. First contact with an alien race, and I've already broken their mental internet. Earth is going to love this report. But her smile faded quickly. This is not a small matter, Nathan. The Vayari believe that bonds like ours lead to contamination of the mind. To them, it is dangerous. He hesitated, trying to make light of it. Dangerous how? Like emotional codependency dangerous, or apocalyptic mind meld dangerous? Her long ears twitched slightly. Both. That shut him up for a few seconds. Right. So, not ideal. No, she said softly. They will want to sever it. Nathan's first instinct was humor. Well, good luck explaining that procedure to HR. Then, quieter, can they actually do that? They can try, Sayori said. But to separate us forcibly would be to harm us both. The words hung in the air like a thundercloud. Nathan tried to process it, tried, and failed. It was strange, how something that had started as accidental, even amusing, now felt like a lifeline. He could feel her emotions brushing his like a tide, calm, steady, but under it, a faint current of fear. He walked to her side, hands in his pockets. Hey. We'll figure this out. Maybe I can charm your council into liking me. Humans are good at diplomacy. We once made peace with a species that literally spit acid. She looked at him, amused despite herself. You truly believe humor will protect you? It's gotten me this far, he said with a crooked smile. Also, it's a lot cheaper than therapy. They began working again, side by side, their connection humming quietly in the background. But Nathan noticed things, subtle at first. Instruments flickered when they were close. The walls resonated at frequencies just below hearing. Even the ship's AI seemed to pause longer when responding to him, as if recalibrating around their shared presence. When he reached for a tool, Sayori did the same, and for an instant, their hands brushed. The touch was electric, not painful, but charged, like two circuits snapping together. Lights across the lab dimmed, then flared in a synchronized pulse. Okay, Nathan said, staring at the glowing consoles, either that's a good sign, or we just invented the universe's first romantic power surge. Sayori stepped back, her expression unreadable. Our bond is expanding. It reacts to emotion. You mean every time I make a bad joke, the ship might short-circuit? Yes. He grinned. Then we're doomed. But beneath the banter, his chest felt tight. There was something incredible and terrifying about it all, the idea that two minds, from worlds apart, could merge so completely that even the environment responded. He wanted to study it, understand it, but part of him also wanted to protect it, irrationally, like a secret too fragile to expose. That night, the dream returned. He found himself standing on her world again, the crystalline fields glowing under alien constellations. Sayori stood beside him, her hair glinting like liquid night. The air shimmered with energy, vibrating between them. This place, he said, is it real? It was, she replied. Now it lives only in memory. My people abandoned such beauty to preserve order. He looked at her, seeing the faint sadness in her eyes. You miss it. Sometimes, she admitted. But memories fade when they are not shared. He reached for her hand, hesitant, half aware that this was only a dream. Then share it. The moment their fingers touched, the world fractured into light. He awoke in his bed, gasping, the echo of her heartbeat still pulsing in his mind. When he stumbled into the lab the next morning, bleary-eyed, Sayori was waiting. She looked at him with a knowing smile. You dream loudly again. He groaned. Fantastic. Not only am I telepathically entangled, I'm also broadcasting my dreams like a space radio. You dream of my home, she said. I also dream of pizza sometimes, he replied. Doesn't mean I want to marry it. Her expression softened, and he realized, too late, that she was teasing him back. "Your metaphors are strange," she said, "but endearing." For a long moment, they stood there, caught between laughter and something deeper. Then the lights flickered again, and a low, distant chime echoed through the corridors, an alert. Sayori's expression darkened. "They are coming," she whispered. "The council wishes to speak with us." Nathan straightened, heart pounding. "Do they, take bribes? Because all I've got is sarcasm and half a candy bar." "Be serious," she said, though her eyes sparkled faintly. He took a deep breath. "Oh, I'm serious." Terrified, but serious. As the doors slid open and the council's emissaries entered, tall, gleaming figures radiating authority, Nathan felt Sayori's thoughts brush his once more, steady and calm. "Whatever happens, do not fear." He managed a grin. "I'll try, but fear's kind of my default setting." The emissaries began to speak in silent unison, their collective voice pressing against his mind like an ocean wave. And for the first time, Nathan realized how small he truly was, and how much he stood to lose. Still, as he glanced at Sayori beside him, standing tall and defiant, he found himself whispering under his breath, "Well, here goes humanity's first psychic disciplinary hearing. Wish me luck." Her thought echoed softly, with a trace of laughter. Always. The chamber into which they were summoned looked less like a courtroom and more like the inside of a luminous seashell. Light pulsed through translucent walls, and the air shimmered faintly, as if the entire place breathed in sync with the beings inside it. Nathan couldn't decide whether to be awed or nauseous. Probably both. The council stood, or floated, on a raised dais, a semicircle of tall Veyari whose eyes glowed faintly like blue suns. Their thoughts pressed into Nathan's skull even before they spoke aloud. It was a sensation somewhere between being scolded by a telepathic parent and getting brain freeze. "Human," their voices said in perfect unison. "You have trespassed upon the sacred field of resonance. The bond you share with Sayori Vayan is unauthorized." Nathan swallowed. "Right, so, first off, love what you've done with the place. Very atmospheric. Second, unauthorized how exactly? Because where I'm from, unauthorized usually just means paperwork." A pulse of psychic disapproval rippled through the room so sharply he flinched. Sayori stepped forward, her voice calm but firm. "Counselors, the resonance formed naturally. It was not intended. He bears no fault." The tallest of the council inclined its head slightly. "No fault, perhaps. But danger. The human mind is chaotic, unbounded. Its patterns bleed into yours. You risk contamination." "Hey, that's not fair," Nathan said quickly. "My mind is, well, okay, it's kind of chaotic, but mostly harmless. You should see it on coffee." Sayori gave him a tiny, warning glance, but her lips twitched despite herself. The council ignored his attempt at levity. "You will submit to separation," they said, "for the good of the Veyari." "And if I say no?" Nathan asked before he could stop himself. The psychic temperature in the room dropped several degrees. One of the counselors turned its gaze directly upon him, and for a moment he felt as though his thoughts were being peeled apart like pages from an open book. Then, just as suddenly, the pressure lifted. "Then both of you will be exiled," came the answer. Sayori's hand twitched at her side, almost imperceptibly. Nathan noticed it anyway. "Exiled where?" he asked. The council did not answer. "Okay," Nathan muttered, "that's not ominous at all." He could feel Sayori's thoughts brushing against his, steadying, reassuring. "Do not argue further." "I wasn't arguing," he replied mentally, "I was, strategically negotiating." Her mental sigh echoed faintly in his skull. "You are a terrible negotiator." "You say that, but I'm still alive," he thought back. The hearing continued in a blur of formal telepathic exchanges Nathan only half understood. The decision, when it came, was swift. They would have 3 planetary rotations to dissolve the resonance on their own. If they failed, exile would be permanent. Back in the corridor, Nathan exhaled shakily. 3 days. That's generous of them. Very magnanimous. Almost like they want us to panic in style. Sayori turned to face him. They believe the bond will fade if we resist it. And will it? Her silence was answer enough. They walked the long corridor back to the lab, their footsteps echoing faintly against the ship's humming floors. Nathan couldn't stop thinking about how strange it felt, this connection that was both terrifying and intoxicating. Every time she glanced his way, he felt her thoughts ripple faintly against his, like a soft whisper he couldn't quite ignore. So, he said finally, just to confirm, our plan is to not panic, not get exiled, and somehow figure out interspecies psychic separation in 72 hours. That is correct. Good. Because panicking was my backup plan. When they entered the lab, the ship's AI flickered to life. Dr. Carter, it said in its blandly cheerful tone, your emotional readings are elevated beyond acceptable parameters. Would you like me to play soothing whale sounds from Earth? No, Nathan said flatly. The last thing I need is to be serenaded by aquatic mammals while facing cosmic deportation. Sayori gave a soft laugh, the kind that made his chest tighten unexpectedly. Your machines are curious companions. Yeah, he said, staring at her. Curious is one word for it. They worked through the night, testing neural dampeners, psychic inhibitors, anything that might reduce the resonance between them. Nothing worked. Each attempt only seemed to make the bond flare brighter, like a flame refusing to be smothered. At one point, exhausted and frustrated, Nathan threw his gloves onto the console. This is ridiculous. Every scientific principle I know says this shouldn't even be possible. You're an alien telepath, I'm a stressed-out human, and somehow our brains decided to start a long-distance relationship without asking. Sayori tilted her head. Perhaps the universe does not always obey your science. He grinned wearily. That's just what every scientist loves to hear. She smiled faintly. You mock because you fear. I mock because it's cheaper than therapy, he corrected. Then, softer, but yeah. Maybe a little of both. Silence settled between them, warm and fragile. She reached out and placed her hand lightly against his temple. Do you wish it gone? He hesitated. The logical answer was yes, it was dangerous, unnatural, and getting them both in trouble. But logic had very little power in that moment. I don't know, he said honestly. It feels like something I was supposed to find. Her eyes met his, full of quiet understanding. Then perhaps it is not meant to be undone. Before he could respond, the ship jolted violently. Alarms blared. The AI's voice cut in sharply, warning. Spatial distortion detected off the port bow. They ran to the observation deck. Outside, space rippled like liquid glass. A vast, twisting rift opened before them, a tear in the fabric of reality itself, glowing with impossible light. Sayori's expression tightened. It is them. The Council. No, she whispered. Something older. Something that watches the resonance, and hungers for it. Nathan blinked. Fantastic. So not only are we psychically linked and about to be exiled, now we've also attracted a cosmic monster that eats telepathic connections. This week just keeps getting better. He glanced at her, trying for a grin but failing. Tell me you've got a plan. Her answer came through the bond, steady and unwavering. Yes. But you will not like it. He sighed. That's becoming a theme with you. And as the rift widened, swallowing the stars, he realized that whatever her plan was, it might be the only thing standing between them, and oblivion. Nathan had always imagined that staring into the end of the universe would be quieter. Instead, it roared. The rift outside the viewing bay howled like a cosmic storm, twisting the light of distant stars into spirals that looked too deliberate to be random. Space shouldn't move like that. Space shouldn't breathe. But it did, deep, rhythmic, alive. He gripped the railing and shouted over the rising hum, "So, just to confirm, that's not normal, right?" Sayori didn't answer at first. Her pupils had dilated until they almost swallowed the silver of her eyes. When she spoke, her voice was calm in a way that made him more nervous. "It is the void siphon. A remnant from before our age. It feeds on thought, memory, connection. So, like a psychic black hole," Nathan said. "Except hungrier and with worse manners." Her head tilted slightly, a flicker of humor sparking through the telepathic link. "Your metaphors are crude, but accurate." "Hey, crude metaphors got humanity to the moon," he said, trying to sound braver than he felt. "What's the plan, Commander Longears?" She turned to him sharply, but he could feel her amusement brushing against his thoughts like a spark. "If we survive this, I shall remember that name." "Good," he said. "I like leaving an impression." The ship lurched violently, throwing him to the floor. The lights flickered red, alarms cascading in a dizzying rhythm. The AI's voice blared, "Warning. Telepathic interference increasing. Hull integrity at 62%. Sayori knelt beside him, gripping the console. "The siphon senses us. Our bond draws its attention. If we sever it," he groaned, rubbing his head. Yeah, I know. "If we break the connection, it might lose interest. But that's kind of like saying if I stop existing, I'll have fewer problems." "You exaggerate." "I'm human," he shot back. "It's my superpower." Her mental voice softened. "Nathan, if we stay linked, it will consume us both. If we part, perhaps one may survive." He looked up at her, the silver glow of the rift reflecting off her pale skin. She looked like some myth carved from starlight, beautiful, alien, and absolutely impossible to reason with. "You're not seriously suggesting, I am," she interrupted. "You must allow me to bear it alone." "Not a chance," he said, standing. "If this thing's hungry, it can choke on both of us." The ship shuddered again, gravity fluctuating. Tools and fragments of data screens floated, then slammed back down. Nathan grabbed a railing as Sayori steadied herself telepathically, anchoring their bodies through the resonance. The sensation was warm and electric, his heartbeat matching hers in impossible sync. For a moment, everything outside the ship went silent. Then, through the viewport, a vast, shimmering face began to form in the rift. It wasn't a face in the human sense, but something that pretended to be, a shifting geometry of eyes, mouths, and whispers, all overlapping in a single impossible expression. It spoke without sound, and the vibration crawled through Nathan's skull like cold water. "Thoughts, bright, connected, feed." Nathan flinched. "Okay, that's enough Eldritch ASMR for today." Sayori's voice sharpened inside his head. "Nathan, listen to me. If we amplify the resonance, won't that make us a bigger target?" "Yes. But also, a weapon." He blinked. "I like where this is going, but I feel like I should file a complaint with the laws of physics." Ignoring him, she stepped forward and raised both hands. The air shimmered around her, threads of faint blue light spiraling outward. He felt her mind pressing against his, pulling him in. Their bond pulsed, hot and luminous. "Join me," she said. "We will reflect it back." He hesitated only a second. "Well," he muttered, "if this kills us, I'm haunting you." The connection deepened, his thoughts bleeding into hers, hers into his. Suddenly he wasn't just with Sayori, he was inside her awareness, seeing through her memories, her fears, her wonder. He saw the vast oceans of her homeworld, the crystalline spires rising from their depths, the isolation that came from being able to hear every thought but never truly be understood. And she saw him, his childhood laughter, the quiet loneliness of a man who spoke too much and was still never heard, the ache of wanting meaning in an endless sky. Their minds collided, fused, burned. The siphon screamed. Light erupted from the ship like a pulse bomb. The rift convulsed, folding in on itself, its geometry twisting, fracturing, retreating. Every fragment of its being was reflected back, not into space, but into itself, a feedback loop of thought that devoured its hunger. Then, silence. The ship drifted in the aftermath, battered but whole. Nathan slumped against the console, dizzy. Well, he gasped, that was either the best idea we've ever had or the worst. Sayori stood perfectly still, eyes closed. For a heartbeat, he thought she was gone. Then she opened them slowly, and the silver glow was gone, replaced by something softer. It is over, she whispered into his mind. The siphon is sealed. He exhaled. Good. Because I was running out of witty remarks. But even as he tried to make light of it, he could feel something strange. The resonance had changed. It was still there, but deeper, quieter, no longer a tether but a harmony. She turned toward him, her voice now more gentle, almost human. Our minds remain linked, but differently. The council will sense this. So what do we tell them? The truth, she said simply. That we survived by becoming one. He smirked. You realize that sounds like a bad romantic comedy pitch. Then let it be one, she said, and this time, when her smile reached him, not just in his eyes but in his mind, it was warm enough to drown out the stars. And for the first time since arriving on the ship, Nathan didn't feel like the only human in the universe. He felt understood. The Eclipser had drifted in the aftermath of the siphon's destruction, a quiet hum vibrating through its hull like the lingering heartbeat of a universe that had just glimpsed something impossible. Nathan walked through the corridors, hands in his pockets, trying not to think about the echoes of Sayori's mind brushing against his. It was impossible, even when he turned a corner, even when he stared at an empty console, he could feel her presence like the faintest brush of wind across skin. He found her in the observation deck, gazing out at the stars. The rift was gone, leaving only a dark tapestry dotted with light, serene in its ordinary beauty. Her posture was still, regal, but the shimmer of her psychic aura pulsed faintly, a soft reminder that she was still very much aware of him, very much aware of their bond. You're up early, he said, leaning against the rail beside her. I do not sleep as you do, she replied. Her voice was calm, but he could feel the subtle amusement threading through it. Though I understand the appeal of dreams. Nathan chuckled. Yeah, dreams are nice. Except when they're haunted by terrifying interdimensional rifts, but otherwise, pretty solid. She tilted her head. You do not always speak aloud what you think. Occasionally, he said, smirking. Mostly when the universe has been particularly rude. A faint laugh rippled in his mind, hers, silent but tangible, and Nathan realized he had stopped caring about propriety, about boundaries, about all the rules he'd been taught in basic astronaut etiquette. With Sayori, the rules felt flexible. Dangerous, sometimes, but liberating. You have changed, she said quietly, her gaze still on the stars. Since the siphon. I have, he asked. I feel like I'm mostly just dustier and more caffeinated. Her thoughts brushed his again, soft and insistent. No. More aware. More, present. He smiled faintly, feeling the warmth of her presence curl through his chest. I guess being almost eaten by a cosmic psychic entity has that effect. Makes you appreciate the little things. Like gravity that doesn't fluctuate violently, or food that isn't infused with existential dread. She turned toward him fully, her eyes reflecting starlight, her long ears twitching. And yet you laugh. Despite everything. It's what humans do, he said. Laugh at things we shouldn't. Sometimes it keeps the universe from noticing we're terrified. Sayori's expression softened. She extended a hand, and Nathan felt the familiar pull of their psychic resonance. Not intrusive, not consuming, now it was steady, a bridge rather than a bond tangled in chaos. He reached for her hand, and for the first time, it felt like home. "The council will still require an explanation," she said. Nathan groaned. "Right, paperwork. Nothing like being called in after almost dying in space for a performance review." "You are exaggerating," she said, though a faint trace of humor tinged her voice. "Exaggeration is my second superpower," he said, leaning on the railing. "First is attracting cosmic horrors through sheer stupidity." She laughed, though it was quiet, a sound that brushed against him more than it filled the room. "We survived." "Yes," he said, taking a deep breath. "And somehow, against all odds, we're both still alive. I'm not sure if that's luck, skill, or sheer annoying persistence on my part." "Persistence is a valuable trait," she said, her tone teasing now. "Even if it borders on recklessness." Nathan smiled. "I'll take what I can get." "So, council paperwork. Any suggestions?" "Honesty," she said. "And perhaps, humility." "Humility, eh?" He raised an eyebrow. "I'll try. Though I suspect it may conflict with my natural charm." A pulse of laughter, hers, rippled in his mind. He felt lighter than he had in days, lighter than he had in years. The bond that had once threatened to tear them apart now felt like a quiet river, steady, resilient, alive. It hummed between them, carrying memories of fear, wonder, laughter, and an odd kind of trust. "Do you ever regret it?" he asked, a little hesitant. "The bond, I mean. Getting mixed up in all of this." Her gaze met his fully. "No. For the first time, someone sees me. Not just my thoughts, but everything. And I see you." Nathan blinked. "Everything?" "Yes," she said softly. "Even the things you try to hide behind jokes." He let out a long breath, feeling the tension of weeks melt away. "Well. Then I guess I'll have to keep making bad jokes, just to keep things fair." She tilted her head, amusement sparkling in her eyes. "Very well. I shall endure them." He grinned. "And I'll endure your long ears twitching every time I do something stupid." "Deal," she replied, and this time her smile reached him in ways that words could never fully describe. The ship shuddered gently, as if approving. Nathan looked out at the void, the stars blinking in silent witness. For the first time, the vastness of space didn't feel threatening. It felt alive, vast, yes, but not lonely. Not while she was there. "Ready to face the council?" he asked. "I am," she said. "And you?" "Let's just say I've got a cosmic story to tell," he said with a crooked grin. "One that may involve interdimensional rifts, psychic bonds, and me, still alive by some miracle." She reached for his hand again, and the hum of their minds intertwined, gentle now, resonant, steady. "Then let us go," she said. Nathan took a deep breath, feeling the bond pulse softly, carrying not fear this time, but trust. And as they moved toward the council chambers, he realized that the universe had not only given him danger and chaos, it had given him connection, understanding, and perhaps the faintest glimmer of something more. Somewhere in the vast, starlit silence of the cosmos, he whispered, "Well, Sayori, we survived. I'd call that a win." Her response was quiet but full of warmth. "Yes. And perhaps the beginning of many more." The Eclipsera moved steadily forward, carrying them through the infinite darkness, yet for the first time, Nathan felt that darkness was not so empty. It was full of possibility, of understanding, and of a bond that neither distance, danger, nor the judgment of 1,000 worlds could break. And as the stars passed by, shimmering softly in the wake of the rift's closure, he realized that this was not the end. It was the beginning. A beginning written not in fear, but in thought, laughter, and the quiet, enduring pulse of two minds finally meeting across the vastness of space. The council chambers were quiet, almost serene, as Nathan and Sailry entered. The usual hum of psychic authority vibrated faintly, but this time it did not feel oppressive. Instead, it carried a strange sense of anticipation, as if the Vayari themselves were curious to witness the resolution of an event they had long feared but secretly found fascinating. The council floated in a semicircle, their luminous forms reflecting softly against the walls. The eldest among them, a figure whose presence radiated authority like sunlight across ice, regarded Nathan with unreadable intent. "Human," it intoned, "you stand before us. You have faced the void siphon, survived its hunger, and endured the resonance with Sailry Vayan. Speak. Explain your actions." Nathan took a deep breath and tried to ignore the faint quiver of panic rising in his chest. Humor had always been his first instinct, and he knew it might be the only shield he had. "Well," he began, "if you're asking for honesty, I'd say it was mostly poor planning, stubbornness, and the occasional ridiculous burst of courage. Oh, and bad jokes." A ripple of amusement traveled through the chamber, subtle, but Nathan noticed it immediately. Sailry's mental smile brushed against his thoughts, grounding him. "The human," the council murmured collectively. "Despite chaos and error, you have survived. More, you have harmonized with a Vayari mind without destruction. This is unprecedented." Nathan raised an eyebrow. "Unprecedented? That's a polite way of saying you're all completely terrified." Her quiet laughter resonated in his mind. "You have a strange way of presenting diplomacy." He shrugged. "It's effective. Sometimes." The council shifted, communicating silently among themselves. Nathan could feel the faint pressure of their thoughts, probing, questioning, but not hostile. Finally, the eldest spoke again. "We had feared contamination, loss of identity. Yet, your actions preserved distinction while creating understanding. You have evolved." Sailry's hand found his, warm, tethering him through the subtle psychic resonance that now hummed softly between them. Nathan squeezed her hand back, feeling a new kind of courage surge through him. He had been terrified, yes, had stumbled through mistakes, but he had also learned, about trust, about connection, about the hidden strength that comes from opening oneself to another mind. "We will not sever the bond," the council declared. "It is unusual. Risky. Yet it demonstrates a principle worth observing. You may continue, but with guidance and oversight. Your survival is proof of resilience, and your resonance may become a bridge, not a hazard." Nathan blinked. "So, we get to keep it?" "Yes," Sailry's voice whispered in his thoughts. "We are allowed to continue." He let out a long, relieved breath. "I thought you were going to say we have to host a formal apology dinner for the galaxy." Her amusement flickered through his mind. "Perhaps next cycle." The council began to fade from the chamber, leaving Nathan and Sailry alone. The hum of the Eclipsera returned to its normal rhythm, steady and reassuring. Nathan looked around, finally able to exhale fully, to feel the weight of weeks, months, lift from his shoulders. He turned to Sailry. "You know, I didn't think I'd survive this mission. And I definitely didn't think I'd, feel this way. About anyone. About anything, really." Her gaze softened. "And yet, here we are. Stronger, alive, and, together." Nathan grinned. "Together. I like that. Even if it means dealing with long ears twitching at all my terrible jokes for the rest of eternity." Her lips quirked, a smile full of warmth and understanding. "I can endure it." They moved to the observation deck together, gazing at the stars that stretched endlessly beyond the ship. Nathan realized how much he had changed, not just in skill or survival, but in perspective. He had learned that fear could be a compass, that trust was a bridge across worlds, and that even the smallest human gestures, a joke, a shared glance, a hand held across the vastness, could carry infinite weight. The bond between them pulsed gently, a quiet harmony now, no longer chaotic, no longer a hazard, but a living testament to connection. Nathan felt a profound sense of peace, of belonging in a universe that had once seemed cold and incomprehensible. "So," he said softly, "what now? Do we go explore more cosmic horrors? Try not to get eaten by ancient psychic entities again?" Sayori's eyes gleamed faintly. "We explore, together. Learning, observing, sharing. But we are no longer victims of circumstance. We are participants. Creators of understanding." Nathan nodded, letting the enormity of it sink in. The galaxy spread before them, vast, mysterious, and no longer threatening, a canvas for possibility. He felt her thoughts brush against his gently, like a warm current carrying the promise of countless journeys ahead. He chuckled softly. "I suppose that means no more boring coffee breaks. At least, not in a conventional sense." Her laughter echoed in his mind, light and unburdened. Perhaps not. For the first time in a long while, Nathan felt the universe was not an obstacle to endure but a companion to navigate. The trials, the fear, the laughter, the chaos, it had all led here, to understanding, to connection, to a shared heartbeat between two minds from distant worlds. He turned to Sayori fully, the stars reflected in her eyes. "Thank you," he said simply. "For seeing me. For letting me see you." Her smile was soft, radiant, and unyielding. "And thank you, Nathan, for being yourself." They stood together, hand in hand, minds gently intertwined, watching as the Eclipsera moved forward into the endless night. And in that shared silence, filled with light, laughter, and unspoken understanding, Nathan realized that some journeys did not end, they merely began anew. The galaxy stretched before them, infinite, luminous, and full of possibilities, and for the first time, Nathan felt truly at home.